Ngā mihi nui, kia koutou katoa, ko Paula Tesoriero tōku ingoa. I'm the Disability Rights Commissioner. Welcome to my end of year report, where I talk about my reflections on 2021 and goals for next year. Before I reflect on this year, I'd first like to really acknowledge those of you, some of who I met for the first time, many who I've worked with for a long time, who have done some really hard mahi, despite the really challenging circumstances that we've all faced this year as we adjust to living with COVID and the new variants. To those people, too many to name, I applaud and thank you for everything you do for the disability community. By working together, you've achieved a lot this year, and it's been a privilege to engage with you all, and I'm really looking forward to a productive year together next year to further the rights of disabled people. And we know from too many key reports and surveys this year that disabled people continue to fall behind in a number of areas, and we need that to change. Saying 2021 has been a challenging year would be a real understatement, but I'm amazed that despite the challenges of various lockdowns, we've accomplished so much by working together. Because of our collective and collaborative approach, some barriers to equitable and accessible vaccine, health and wellbeing services were lowered. But there is much more to do as we understand and navigate the traffic light system of managing COVID and what a post-COVID world might look like. Here at the Human Rights Commission, we are facing a significant increase in requests for assistance from people as New Zealanders try and navigate the various rights and responsibilities to do with COVID. Having said all of that, I'm much more optimistic now than I have been for a long time about shifting towards a more diverse, equitable and inclusive society for disabled people. So let's touch on a couple of big developments of 2021. First, there was the announcement of the new Ministry of Disabled People next year, the scaling up of Enabling Good Lives, and proposed new accessibility legislation, and finally, a 25-year strategy to address family and sexual violence, which will specifically attend to the prevention and impacts on tangata whaikaha Māori and disabled people. And I hope that will see the start of a fundamental shift. What's really critical with all of those announcements is that disabled people are front and centre in making these changes happen. COVID aside, 2021 saw me work on a number of key focus areas, and I just want to touch on some of them quickly. So some of the big things that we were involved in this year was, firstly, the Human Rights Commission launched our guidelines on the right to a decent home, and I and the team were able to bring a disability lens to that work. I was also able to contribute to the ongoing health reforms, and that will continue to be a big focus next year. A big focus this year has been on really trying to continue advocating and putting pressure on the need to build an inclusive education system so that all disabled tamariki and rangatahi can thrive in our New Zealand education system. I also had input into some of the housing reforms, and that will also be a big focus next year. And this year, I set up a justice roundtable where, with a group of amazing professionals, disabled people, academics and others, who we hope next year will further contribute to some thinking about the justice system and how it could improve for disabled people. I just want to expand on a few additional pieces of work that I'm really proud of. The first is the former Children's Commissioner, Judge Andrew Beecroft, and I launched our report to the Prime Minister on fetal alcohol spectrum disorder, a call to action. The report called for much better recognition and support for people affected by FASD and their whānau, and made a number of recommendations that I hope will be implemented. Next year, this work will also start to look at other groups who miss out on being able to access critical support services. People with ADHD, people with some rare disorders, people with ME, just to name a few, who don't have equitable access. Recently, I also released 2 reports on violence and abuse of tangata whaikaha Māori and disabled people. Whakamanahia te tiriti, whakahaumarutia te tangata. Honour the treaty, protect the person. And the second report, whakamahia te tūkino kore inaia nei, āmiuri ake nei, acting now for a violence and abuse-free future. These reports set out, for the first time, the evidence available on the cause and impacts of violence and abuse against tangata whaikaha Māori and disabled people. They came with a set of comprehensive recommendations that must be implemented if we are to turn around this neglect and abuse that we have seen. And then another really exciting priority for 2021 was working closely with our community to co-design a strategy for challenging the discriminatory attitudes towards disability and disabled people. The working title for this is Project Mobilise. 2022 will see me bringing those reports and campaign to life. I will be seeking partners to help bring to life Project Mobilise to reality. My vision is for a long-term movement that becomes self-determining and perpetuating and goes over many years. It is a vision where disabled people live good lives in Aotearoa and attitudes are non-discriminatory. Our co-design group, comprising tangata whaikaha Māori, disabled people, Pacifica disabled and non-disabled people, will present the strategy in the first quarter of 2022. I will then work with philanthropic organisations and the government to get this off the ground. So I'll be meeting with a lot of people to find the necessary funding and partners to bring together this 5-year campaign of social change. On violence and abuse of tangata whaikaha Māori and disabled people, I will focus on making sure the 2 reports I launched are familiarised with policy writers, educators, influencers and government. I will establish an action plan to work through those recommendations. I will continue advocating for equal access to disability support services for those with FASD and also those with other impairments. And I will continue my work on advocating for an inclusive education system. I expect to be doing more on the housing front next year, so watch this space. I will continue my work with our Justice Roundtable and continue to have input into the health reforms and the establishment of the new ministry. And of course, there will be the ongoing need to ensure that the COVID response adequately addresses the needs for disabled people in Aotearoa. These initiatives intersect with our business as usual work program for 2022, which is more extensive and detailed. I will continue to do all I can to ensure that disabled people are central in decision making across all fronts, in particular with the new ministry being established. I encourage you to learn more about that, to get involved, and also to make a submission on the proposed accessibility legislation so we can ensure it's as good as possible. More detailed information on this report will be available on my social media page and on our website. Finally, thank you for all that you do for the disability community, It's a privilege to work with you all, and I look forward to working collaboratively next year to further advance the rights of disabled people here in Aotearoa, New Zealand. Ngā mihi nui, kia koutou katoa.